happy to welcome you today to the President's Circle Luncheon as the current president of the Santa Barbara Women's Political Committee. When I think about the future of feminism, I turn back to the vision of WPC, which is to achieve a society based upon the feminist values of social, political, racial, and economic gender equality. I'm inspired by the freshmen and senior women in Congress who are not content to be window dressing in the chambers of the Capitol. They're speaking truth to power and yielding their influence and position to call for accountability and change. As women, as feminists, we must keep standing against sexism, xenophobia, Islamophobia, transphobia, racism, and hate in all its forms. But I believe in the power we have as feminists, and I'm proud that we've worked hard to elect feminist leaders like Betty Yee, who will continue to lead us here in California. Thank you again for joining us and for supporting the mission of the Santa Barbara Women's Political Committee. We can't keep doing this work without you and your support. So thank you. Welcome.
I'm Helene Schneider. I'm a past president and a former mayor, and it's great to see all these women mayors in the room and former woman mayors in the room and a whole bunch of things. So I have the distinct honor to introduce our keynote speaker today, State Controller Betty Yee. Over her 30-plus years of public service, Betty Yee has received numerous awards and broad recognition for her work specializing in state and local finance and tax policy. She's represented us in the state of California before the United States Congress on numerous occasions on multi-state tax issues. It's been an honor to know Betty for these many years, see her take on great challenges and obstacles with wit and grace, to call her a friend. Basically, she's just awesome. Please welcome Comptroller Betty Yee.
Thank you very much, Helene. Good afternoon. I'm thrilled to be here and thrilled to be just first to thank the Santa Barbara Women's Political Committee for its support of my public service over these years. And I'm just going to also ask you to pay tribute to our global neighbors in New Zealand, because obviously what happened to me is really an example of how, when there are social divisions, consciously or unconsciously, that those who hate and those who attack are going to exploit those divisions. So in terms of what's happened to feminism, yes, the commercialization of it, but at the heart of it, we still are talking about how we fight back against and end the systemic oppression of women. And it may be, and we have made improvements, and we have made strides, but at the end of the day, when we talk about the Me Too movement, when we talk about so much of what is being threatened in terms of our rights that have been really have been fought hard and long for, it is the fact that we still need to talk about how we end this systemic oppression. And so when we look at movements like the Resist movement, when we look at movements like the women's marches, that is definitely one way of elevating our activism to address issues like that. And when we talk about intersectionality, that is also an approach that I think has been very effective in terms of really defining who we are. We are not single-dimensional. You know, our identities are really about the history of our identities, and our identities are about how we are part of every community. And so I think that has been a real stride. It's not about male bashing. I hope it's not about male bashing, because we love our allies and our men and our institutions who are really doing that work for us. With respect to the changing nature of work, so as we think about economic sectors, and certainly I think about the agricultural sector, and one of the things that I like to do from my perspective as the state controller, obviously as I'm speaking, everything that I do is through the lens of the economy. But I also like to see what the interconnectedness is of different aspects of our economy. And I do think one of the major opportunities that we have, particularly locally and regionally, with respect to how we can marry climate change and the changing nature of work, is looking at how we deploy technology in a more localized, regional way to deal with issues of food security, food safety, and water supply. But with respect to the changing nature of work, it is not a surprise that when we talk about technology, who's at the table developing the technology? Very few who look like us. Who's making the decision about where to deploy technology? Very few who look like us. And who gets to inform and actually begin to teach the next generation? I would say not even the next generation. All of us, because of what we're going to need to live and to work, really need to become more technologically proficient. From young childhood to older adulthood, this is our life now. And so our educational institutions, our community colleges especially, become even more important in terms of being that conduit. And so everything I'm speaking about, to me, smacks of opportunity. I delight in reading articles about robotics, because a lot of agricultural employers especially think that robots can do the job. But I understand they still can't find strawberries in strawberry fields all night long for all the leaves. And so obviously to be refined. But when I think about AI, robotics really taking hold in terms of the economic sectors, I think about how we can reimagine work, and frankly how we can reallocate work, because with technology we ought to have the ability to do that, so that we ought to, at the very first moment, make that investment to be sure that everyone has access in California to reliable and cost-effective broadband. Still a challenge in California. And the reason it's a challenge is because many of our telecom companies and others who are in this space will tell you it's not a good return on investment. But what's not considered are the economic impacts when you are able to connect with almost any part of the world to create economic opportunity. And when I grew up in San Francisco, and this is all driven, and this is the richness, I look at all of you out here in this diverse audience. All of this is driven by the richness of the communities from which we emerge, from our own personal history. You know, as I talk about my mother and being a daughter of immigrants, and there are many more who share that experience in this room. You know, from having grown up in a small business, a family business, you know, from having been a product of public schools, to, you know, how that continues to really inform the lens of the work through which I do today. And that, for all of us, I think is really what emanates in terms of the work that we do. Because when we talk about systemic oppression of women, it's not just here in our own backyard. We know this is a global issue. But what happens here in terms of how we address it will reach other parts of the globe. And that's what's so magical about California. We do lead. We do lead the rest of the nation, but we really lead the world. And so I'm just going to leave here on this occasion of Women's History Month to say we have many, many role models from which we can really gain our strength and see as examples that Rosa Parks was not the demure woman who boarded the bus and then went to the back of the bus, or went to wouldn't sit in the back of the bus. She was an activist with an NAACP. She had a loud voice, right? All the activists from history, as we talk about them, and the Native American sisters, who were really the ones that actually got to decide who their leaders were. I mean, women had power because they understood what that meant. So let's be that power base that can help us really seek the change and enact the change that we want to see. But more importantly, as we look out at each other, to know that we're going to be joined shoulder to shoulder, and we are not going to leave any gap for anyone to come in to divide us, to exclude us, and more importantly, never to exploit us anymore. Thank you all for the opportunity.